Welcome to the Northeast Kingdom Voice. I'm your host, Scott Wheeler. Today's guest is one of my favorite guests, Krista Berry, the director of the Old Stone House Museum. Welcome back to the show, Krista.
Thanks for having me back. I'm already one of your favorites. I'm flattered.
No, because we both do history. We both have a love of history, and there's no doubt I could host this show week after week and have you as the guest the entire time, and we would not be able to run out of stuff that we have in common when it comes to history or things that other people might be interested in.
Yeah, no, totally. I agree with that sentiment.
Right. And so you're back here as the director of the Old Stone House, and a lot of people, including myself, when I think of the Old Stone House, besides being a repository of Orleans County history, I think of it as coming to life at the Old Stone House, coming to a screeching halt after the fall season when for the most part it's closed up. But from what you've told me, yeah, things change there, but not necessarily. You're still doing stuff. You're not down in the Bahamas vacationing until spring.
Oh, I wish. Yeah, no, it's in some ways we call it the slow season, and then we laugh about how it never really feels all that slow. So it's really just the non-open season as far as not being open for museum tours. But we still do programs, and we still have our family programs happen all winter long at the grammar school. And so the Old Stone House itself kind of slumbers over the winter, but the staff stay very, very busy. Actually, January 31st, I believe, is going to be our soup and snowshoe event, and so that'll be fun.
I think I learned something new. I didn't know. Maybe I haven't paid attention, but I didn't think I knew that you hosted events in the winter. Do people still draw? Are they still, like, if people are visiting the area? I know they probably can't go into the Old Stone House, but do they stop by just to ask you questions?
Yeah, they do, and it depends too, right? So there are a lot of different types of visitors that come to visit the museum. There are sort of the like general kind of tourist of visitor that's coming for the public facing, like they want to do the tour and they want to see the buildings. And then we have, our program audiences that really come for our special programs and our events. And then we have what I kind of think of as like our business clients, people who have interest in the collection to do research or are looking to, donate artifacts to the museum. So there's a lot of different sort of like layers of different visitors that we interact with. And so seasonally that shifts a little bit to like research, that stays pretty consistent through the year. The main like foot traffic of summer visitorship slows down, but yeah, it just changes the focus over the winter. And then
Right.
the grounds stay open, so you can't go in the buildings, but you're welcome to, enjoy the trails still. We have a walking trail, like a hiking trail that people will snowshoe and stuff in the winter like that.
Right. So what does your job entail? Well, this winter, are you working on any big projects?
Yes, more than I could probably list here in some ways, but I'll do the highlight reel. And so, for the most part, for me, especially as the executive director, my attention turns very heavy into fundraising at this time of the year, as many nonprofits across the country are also have their attention turned to that end of the year fundraising drive. And so, this year, in honor of our 100th anniversary of being a museum, we're doing a campaign called the 100 for 100, where we are asking our friends and neighbors to donate $100 or any amount that is meaningful. Anything is appreciated, but if you can do $100 in recognition of this once in a lifetime anniversary, that's what we're hoping for.
You might want to explain. I know on another show you mentioned what the 100 years entailed, so you might want to explain that again.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny too. I was just reflecting on this last night because it's the 100th anniversary of the museum. So the museum opened in 1925 when the Orleans County Historical Society acquired the Old Stone House. However, the building itself is celebrating its 190th birthday next year. And so the museum has only been a museum for half of the life of the building. The building, of course, had a life before it. So we have a lot of layers of anniversaries happening at the historic village. But this one this year that we're recognizing is 100 years functioning as a museum with the Orleans County Historical Society.
Right. And what would, like, when people donate to you, like, what might their money go towards? Like, I assume there's a lot of upkeep.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we have eight. We have eight buildings. Sometimes, depending on how you count some of the out ones, we tend to count them about eight. And so we have eight buildings. We also have 5 employees, and then we also do hire a couple seasonals to help through the winter programming and to support things like Time Travelers Day Camp. We bring in a lot of visiting educators and programmers and that sort of thing. So it can pay for a multitude of things, and there's almost no way to find a place at the Old Stone House to put your money where you want it to go, whether you're really interested in the buildings themselves, whether you're interested in supporting the people who do the work, whether you're interested in donating towards scholarships for kids to attend our programs. That's also kind of a give back program that we love, that some of our donors like to contribute to. So there's a lot of options. And next year, in particular, what we're fundraising actively for right now, in addition to just general operations, we have two really exciting projects that we're starting off in 2026. One of them is the Old Stone House is getting a window restoration. So there are 60 windows in that 4-story building.
Oh, really?
And
There's that many, huh?
there's that many. I've counted them 4 times. And so I know for
What?
sure now that we've got 60 windows, and they are going to get rehabilitated by historic windows experts. And we're also going to install exterior storm windows. And this is especially exciting and this is where it gets a little nerdy, but because the storm windows are going to have UV filtering panels that are laminated in the glass planes. And so what that does is it cuts down on the light damage. And a lot of people probably don't realize this, but of course, when that building was built, there was no electricity. And even today, there's minimal electricity just really run up the stairwell. And so the source of light that we still rely on is daylight. So there are 60 blinds on all of those windows that we open and close every day for our audience. But anytime those blinds are open, the objects inside are getting cumulative and irreversible light damage. And so adding the UV filtering is going to extend the life of thousands of objects, every object that's inside of that building. So as I like to say, this is probably one of the most impactful projects we could do as far as the sheer number of artifacts that are going to benefit from it. Not just the 60 windows, but the thousands of things inside of the building.
I suspect you'll be putting in windows or storm windows that don't distract from the historic nature of the building.
Yep, absolutely. So they're going to be sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Like minimal profile. And so they're really going to blend in. Ideally, you won't notice the storm windows are on there at all. And they either will have no sash, or we might have to do sort of a single sash to match the sash of the windows. But
Right.
you'll be able to see those 12/12 or 12/8, all of those little panes inside. And so you'll still have the spirit of the building, but an added layer of protection.
Right. Do you put it up for the museum up for hibernation, or do you occasionally check on things?
We monitor it constantly. So it's still monitored all through the winter. in addition to like light damage and that sort of thing. So there's these things that we call the agents of deterioration. So all of the factors in life that basically cause objects to age and wear and deteriorate. And so things like temperature, relative humidity, pests, bugs, rodents, mold, all of those types of things we watch all year. There's a whole checklist of things that we do to put the museum to bed. So there are a lot of things that we will due to winter for the museum to go through the winter, but we do still monitor it, so we're in there quite consistently.
Right. I never thought about it. I guess maybe I thought you shut the doors and shut the windows for the winter. Did a few things, but I had no idea that so much went into it.
Yeah, it's where I get really kind of I can, as I say, I can get really nerdy about it, but that's where it gets all really technical. People who get like conservation degrees, they have so much chemistry that I don't have that much chemistry in my background, but I find it fascinating, and so fighting the forces of aging is a 24/7 job in the museum world.
That's me too. I'm trying to fight the forces of aging, but so far, the forces of aging they're winning on me. They're beating me, but
they beat all of us eventually.
What other projects are you working on?
Well, we have another one. So I should say too. So very much thanks to a grant are we able to do this window project. So we were awarded a Paul Brune revitalization grant through the Preservation Trust of Vermont, and that's a grant that was done in partnership through the National Park Service. So that's also why, to answer kind of another layer of your earlier question, that we will be very strictly following the interior standards as far as historic preservation. So everything we do to that building, it's in the interest of maintaining the original glass, maintaining the original sills, maintaining everything original that we can, replacing minimally what's rotted beyond repair. But it's all about stabilization and keeping things the way they are for the next 100 years, we hope. And so we have that grant to thank for that, taking a huge chunk of the financial burden out of that, and then also the generosity of individual donors as well, helping to fill the remaining gap. And so in addition to the Old Stone House building, as I said, we have other buildings, and another building we have which is not as well known, it's the Cyrus Eaton House, and it sits right on the corner of the campus. So it's where Old Stone House Road and Hinman Settler meet. There's this little white building, and that was actually the first building that joined the campus of the museum after the Old Stone House. So there was a time when the museum was just the Old Stone House, and then the Cyrus Eaton House was its first partner. And so that house has actually been shuttered for 2 years because it's been in a state where we can't have it open to the public, and we haven't really been able to use it. So thanks very much to the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board, who awarded us a grant this year. We will be able to revitalize that building. We're going to be able to put in an ADA accessible bathroom and ramp, and we'll be able to make the first floor completely accessible for public programming, and as well as there's also an upstairs layer that we'll be able to use for operational work and support work like exhibit prep and collections care kind of prep work and that sort of thing. So we're super excited. We got 2 big building projects next year, which will keep us very, very busy.
Wasn't in the past, before you arrived, wasn't there talk about making that Cyrus Eaton House, a part of it, into an Airbnb?
I don't know about that. I know that before my time, there used to be a caretaker that actually worked and lived in the Cyrus Eaton House. So they worked for the museum, and they lived like all year in there. And so thanks to regulations and permitting and egress laws, we can't do that type of thing anymore with that building. And so it probably won't. We're interested in that kind of caretaker role. It was really a very vital role back in its day. We have kind of caretakers now that live very close by, but not quite on campus. So probably could have been talk about the Cyrus Eaton House being a living space,
Yes.
but I know the Hall House is the one that ended up being the Airbnb or being used partially for
Oh,
Airbnb.
maybe I had the wrong. Now, which house? The Hall House?
Yep, the Hall House, the Samuel Reed Hall House. So that
Now, what?
house is across the road from the Cyrus Eaton House. It's the two-story yellow one.
Okay. Now, what was the history of that building?
The Samuel Reed Hall House was built by, so Hall was, or I should say is now famously kind of known, or he's attributed to having created or invented like the chalkboard,
All
and
right.
is the reason that chalkboards are synonymously used in classrooms across the country. He was also really key in starting normal schools, or schools that taught teachers how to teach, right?
Right.
So, and in a style that we still utilize today. So Samuel Reed Hall was a pretty big figure in early education, much like Alexander Twilight. He also spent several years with the Orleans County Grammar School and built his house, the Samuel Reed Hall house there in the village. So that's a little bit of the history. I can't remember
Right.
without looking some stuff up,
So you don't have
the
any.
dates that it joins.
So you don't have any more buildings to drag up the road like you did. Well, not you, but underneath Peggy Day Gibson, they bought the old Grange Hall and pulled it up the road where it is now a. Well, you'll have to explain what it is and was, but where they drew national attention because they used, well, they used oxen to a degree along with modern equipment to pull it up the road. Now, what was that building again?
Yeah, so that's the Orleans County Grammar School building, and that is across the other road from the Hall House. So this is all really like the corner of the campus, all of these buildings. And so, yeah, that building was the original schoolhouse. So the Old Stone House itself was a dormitory for the students. That's where they lived and slept. And then the classroom was a different building up at the foot of Prospect Hill. That building was moved down the road and served as the Grange Hall for Brownington for a handful of years. And then, like you said, in 2016, I think it was Peggy Day Gibson,
Yeah.
she was part of the relocation of it back up to its original footprint. And they had archaeologists come to survey to find, like, truly where we, to our best knowledge, where this building sat, and it was returned to its original footprint there. The Grange does still use it, and so we do still have a partnership with them in that building. But for now, the museum uses it predominantly as our main educational programming hub. So all of our family programs and things like that, most of them are right out of that building, and that's one of those buildings that we keep open all year. So, like I said, how we put some buildings to bed for the winter, but the grammar school we heat all seasons or all year, so that we can have winter season programs.
We've talked before. It just seems so fitting that the Amish decided to set up shop, as a move to your neighborhood because where better than here's the whole campus of the Old Stone House is reflecting back on basically to the days of the horse and buggies, and in comes the Amish. It's like when people are visiting there at the right time when the buggies are going by, it's probably they think they're like reenactors.
Yeah, I don't think anyone mistakes them for reenactors, but I especially for like our out of state visitors, folks who aren't really from these parts, I think they really do get sort of a kick out of the ambiance that it adds. So yeah, it is interesting. It really does make the whole campus feel like it's in its time period, which is nice. And I think something that is really unique about the Old Stone House Museum, and I know, we've mentioned this too about the other thing that kind of makes that village unique is there are kind of manufactured historic villages in other museums, organizations that they relocate buildings or they'll build buildings to like make the village, and it's like, oh, there's the bank and there's the town store, and
Right.
there's all the pieces, and but it is manufactured. It's built to look that way. The Old Stone House Museum and Historic Village, our village was built naturally. Like in the 1800s, that's where those buildings were built, and that's where they've been, with the exception of the grammar school, which moved and then moved back. So now it's where it was in the 1830s. And so the campus is really, it's, I don't want to say it's frozen in time, because it's certainly not stuck in any means. It's very alive and very active,
Right.
but it is very preserved, right? It's preserved its history. It's really interesting. I think about this a lot, about how students that were attending, that school in the 1830s, it doesn't look that much different than visitors who are seeing it today in 2025.
The one thing that I do think the students, if they were able to come back today, they would probably say, "Wow," because back back in that time, and many decades later, the ability to landscape or mow the lawn was not like today. So um, I've seen some older photos where it wasn't as beautiful as today.
Totally. Yeah, I would say it is much more manicured nowadays than it was back then. I've seen
Right,
pictures too where the
right,
field grass is really like pretty much right up to the building, and they were still grazing animals and haying it, and um
right.
so we do mow a lot more than they used to mow, that's for sure. But there's still actively animals grazing on our in our pastures and stuff too. So more lawn, but no.
Right. No, I think I did ask you whether uh, to keep up with the times, whether you. I remember I was there one day, and I think it was before you arrived. I think Molly was. A load of wares, a load of stuff arrived, including toilet paper. And I said, "Well, what are you doing with that?" I said, "You ought to keep up with the times and use like pages of Sears and Roebuck's catalogs like people used to do, or corn cob." And I said, "Get rid of that modern stuff." And Molly, who's just a sweetheart, she's all for historic preservation, but she didn't want to go that far.
It's that's true dedication, and I think that it speaks to one of the challenges of preserving historic resources and also meeting modern day sensibilities. Because yeah, we have porta potties on the campus, which are outhouse esque. They still have toilet paper, and they're very well cared for by jetties. But it endlessly fascinates me how many of our visitors just don't are just like turned off by the idea of a porta potty at all. Let alone, could you imagine if we were asking them to use a real
Oh, yeah.
outhouse?
Yeah, but the interesting thing with my work interviewing older people, there's people alive today, and they're not really that old, who still, maybe 70s, but certainly 80s, who remember going to school and having the outhouse. Or sometimes you didn't even have to go outside. It was an outhouse. You had to walk down a little hall to the outhouse, and there was a girls' side and the boys' side. And, some things just seem, um, yeah, it wasn't that long ago that we were far more primitive than we are now.
For sure. It's funny too. You were making me think of my grandmother, because she lived to be 89, and I just remember she cooked everything in a microwave. She loved the microwave, and she would very often say, "Boy, I just don't know what we did." Before microwaves. And as I got older and I started understanding, dates and timelines and like when things were invented, I finally looked at her one day and I was like, you do know what we did before microwaves. Like you very much lived most of your life without a microwave. Like, and so it was just so funny, because yeah, it's interesting how comfortable we can get with technology. And I think all of us, especially around my age and older, can reflect on, the changing relationships we've had with phones. Phones that used to be
Yeah, are you?
wired to our wall, now everybody has one in their pocket, and it's more than a phone, you know?
So you're old enough to remember when it was attached to the
Oh
wall.
yes, yeah. I was
Yeah.
that. I'm an elder millennial, I think, as they call us. So yeah, I remember when internet came to my house.
Yeah.
Like I remember when my mom got a computer, right? And it was like I think it was a '95. It was like the '95 gateway computer, you know.
Oh, I got a gateway. I got a gateway, and the first one cost, uh, it was amazing. Now they're cheap. Yeah, and how could people donate to
Yeah,
that?
so if you are interested in supporting our 100 for 100 campaign or making any kind of donation, there's never a bad time to donate to the Old Stone House. You can always do it through our website, and you can also mail a check to 109 Old Stone House Road, Brownington, Vermont 05860.
Right. Here's a question. I never asked any of my older people that I've interviewed, but have you talked to people who, as kids, like 60, 80 years, like 80 years ago, that visited the old stone house when it was a museum as part of a school um, project tour?
I have, but it's very like sporadic, opportunistic kind of thing. Like it's not like I haven't had that type of conversation with a lot of people, but every so often, and it's such a pleasure to bump into folks who have that really long memory history with the museum. Even a few of our staff members, it doesn't go back that far, but like Bob Hunt, for instance, he's been with the museum for I think around 25 years. And Darlene Young, our registrar, she wasn't there consistently for 20 years, but she was a board member, previously several decades ago.
Right,
And so it's always really great to talk to folks who have that really long institutional knowledge.
right, right. Yeah, because I think I can. I know I know most. I knew most of the directors over the years, but I like there would be Reed Charrington, uh, and then Davis. I can't remember, but I for the last like 30 years, I seem to 30, 40 years, I think I know most of them, the directors, and now I have the most famous right here.
I'm the most famous one. How am I the most famous one?
Well, because you're in that seat now. Probably Molly was probably famous at the time too.
Yes, yeah. For sure. And I was thinking too, I just get the benefit of getting to be the centennial director, so I get the extra clout that comes with that.
Do you think you'll be there for the bicentennial in 10 years?
Just based on biology, I doubt it, but I'd like to make sure that what we do now gets us there, because the 200 years comes from what we do now. You got to plan for the future. Everybody thinks about historic preservation, about how it's looking backwards, but it's really about looking
Oh, no,
ahead
no, it is.
more than people think it is.
Okay, well, I think that's about it. We've used up our time, but I know you'll be on again. So,
Yes, I'd be happy to come back. It's always a pleasure.
okay, thank you for coming on, and thank you for preserving the history of Orleans County.
Well, and thank
And
you so much too for your support.
right, and thank you to the viewers for tuning in to another segment of the Northeast Kingdom Voice.